Let me take this occasion to tell you why. For a start, you might want to reflect how a pandemic that first engulfed a distant Chinese city then went on to take over your lives so completely for more than 2 years. Or how an ongoing conflict in Europe is now impacting our daily cost of living. And indeed, for that matter, the implications that climate events can have on the many processes that we take so much for granted. Or it could be a different kind of trauma. Terrorism, for instance, where any of us to be caught up in an act of cross-border terrorism or distantly inspired violence. In some cases, as we saw with students trapped in Ukraine or travelers stranded during COVID, that might happen when we are out of the country. But in others, be it COVID itself, conflict, terrorism, or natural disasters, such developments can come right to our doorstep, sometimes even inside our homes. Now, that does not mean that we need to be apprehensive about the world or even defensive in our approach. The flip side of the very interdependence that I underlined with those examples is that the same world is full of opportunities and possibilities. If we brought back 7 million plus Indians during COVID through the Vande Bharat mission, it is because the India of today utilizes the global workplace so effectively. It is due to the fact that our talents and skills are now an intrinsic element of global innovation, manufacturing, and services. It is also reflective of how many Indians actually travel for personal, professional, or tourism purposes. Indeed, these very issues are now central to Indian diplomacy. We strive to ensure better access to our talent, stronger protection for our workers, greater opportunities for our students, and fairer markets for our businesses. But the world is not simply about mobility and migration. It is as much about partnerships, compacts, and understandings that serve all parties well. In fact, a deeper engagement could mean accelerating our national development, exploring more markets, procuring resources, improving our quality of life, and not least, shaping crucial global issues that will determine the future of our planet. In that sense, we are not just moving towards a different model of global interaction, but also one of greater national opportunities. In India, we know that as Atmanirbhar Bharat. There's no question now that foreign policy has deep personal implications for all of us because it impinges on so many aspects of our life. It could be your safety, your welfare, your prospect, or your opportunities. It has transactional and collaborative connotations, especially in the economic and technology domains. Friendshoring and trusted providers are likely to be concepts that will gain ground in the coming days. As before, foreign policy is a constant exercise of building power and exercising influence, whether for national or collective purpose. It can be a competition too for ideas, values, or culture in order to set forth a vision for the future. Each of these facets coexist with the others, much more intensively perhaps in an era of interdependence and interpenetration. International relations itself is now played out in more domains with much greater integration than before. But precisely because it impacts each one of us so deeply, it is essential that we have an obligation to take interest in the games that nations play. Now, it is a paradox that in many ways, even as we speak about the advancements of technology and the promise of science, world politics is actually moving back to the future. Some of this arises from the reality that expectations placed on globalization proved to be over-optimistic. This is not to suggest that the underlying economic interdependence is not well-founded, but by widening differences between and within societies and creating new global power equations, a different set of counter forces have now been set into motion. Once challenges began to be articulated, the globalization model was actually not easy to defend because the benefits were heavily skewed in favor of a few. The political manifestation of globalization has also created its own backlash. When self-appointed custodians of correctness sit in judgment over global happenings across a very wide set of domains, they cannot get away with it forever, especially when they themselves have a vested interest in the outcomes. To add to that, there is also now a proclivity to advance national methodologies that often verge on the mercantilist. We therefore have a situation where political and social identities have sharpened to a point where they create an inherent and unresolvable tension with the nature of economic flows in the world. There are, to my mind, 10 broad reasons why we are now taken more seriously, even as we are moving towards becoming a leading power. And those 10 reasons are: 1, our handling of the COVID, including vaccine production, shots in the arm, the CoWIN platform, and Vaccine Maitri. 2, the robust economic recovery and the digitally enabled socio-economic delivery on a massive scale. This is important because the global economy continues to face serious headwinds. 3, our growing economic relevance to the world, reflected in greater FDI inflows, greater manufacturing, stronger exports, and an embrace of startups. 4, an independent foreign policy in an increasingly polarized world, one that also speaks for the global south. 5, an innovative diplomacy that has introduced new concepts and platforms, as I mentioned, without according a veto to others on our choices. 6, a resolute national security policy that has seen us standing up to daunting challenges in the border areas, even during the COVID period. 7, a determination to look after our own abroad, be it Operation Ganga in Ukraine or Operation Devi Shakti in Afghanistan. 8, a willingness to look out for others and often serve as a first responder in humanitarian or disaster response situations, especially in our own neighborhood. 9, contributing to a global betterment through initiatives in solar energy, disaster resilience, maritime security, and counterterrorism, amongst others. And 10, a perception that India, as a civilizational state, is finding its place once again in the global order. Now, the combination of changes in our political standing, our economic weight, technology capabilities, cultural influence, and the successes of our diaspora is moving India today into a higher orbit. But let us not underestimate the task ahead. For any power to rise in the global order is never easy. But to do so amidst the turbulence that I have described is doubly difficult. But nevertheless, we see a growing recognition in the world that India is now getting its act together. Equally, there is a realization that the big issues of our times cannot be solved without India's contribution or participation. This is a moment when India resets the terms of engagement with the world, it is also a juncture where we should be prepared to take up greater responsibilities. So, for those who are starting off in life, like so many of you, I can only say that there is every reason to be confident. India today has a leadership and a vision, as well as the perseverance and the commitment to enhance its global standing. To those more experienced who've been part of our national journey for the last 75 years, they will surely appreciate the transformation underway and the opportunities that it has generated, opportunities perhaps that my generation did not have. But to all of them, I would only say that I'm sure that they share the conviction that today India matters more in the world.